I'd been living alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood for just over a year, enjoying the stillness that came with autumn evenings. The houses were spaced comfortably apart, and my street was lined with tall maple trees, shedding fiery orange leaves. It was late October, with Halloween just around the corner, when the incident began. That evening, I was curled up on the couch, binge-watching an old crime documentary, when 3 slow, deliberate knocks echoed from the front door. I paused, startled. It wasn't the kind of knock you'd expect from a delivery or a neighbor. It was unnervingly steady, like someone testing my reaction. Grabbing my phone, I tiptoed to the door and squinted through the peephole. No one was there. Outside, the porch was empty, the street deserted under the glow of the amber streetlights. I hesitated for a moment, then convinced myself it must have been kids playing a prank. The next evening, at around 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by the same knock. 3 firm raps, followed by an eerie pause and then 2 more knocks. My heart raced as I crept to the peephole again. Just like before, no one was there. Yet something felt different this time, like the air itself was heavier. As I scanned the dimly lit street, my eyes caught something. A faint shadow, just at the edge of the porch light, where the dark swallowed the edges of my yard. It looked like feet, motionless, tucked just out of sight. A shiver ran down my spine as I stood frozen, unable to make sense of what I was seeing. After several minutes, I backed away and locked the deadbolt, retreating to my bedroom. That night, I barely slept, every creak of the house sending my nerves into overdrive. Was someone testing me? Or worse, waiting for something? The next morning, tired and on edge, I resolved to take action. On my lunch break, I stopped by the hardware store and purchased a motion-activated security camera. I installed it on the porch as soon as I got home, angling it perfectly to capture the doorway and its surroundings. The blinking blue light of the camera gave me some semblance of control, a barrier between me and the unseen. That night, I stayed up late, monitoring the camera feed on my phone and waiting for any sign of activity. Hours passed without incident, and by 2 a.m., I was beginning to wonder if my fears had been unfounded. Exhausted, I finally let myself drift off to sleep. The next morning, though, when I reviewed the footage, my stomach dropped. At 2:45 a.m., the camera had recorded a figure stepping just into view, a man in a dark hoodie. He stood perfectly still, just outside the porch light's reach, his head tilted downward as if studying the door. The sight of him sent a wave of cold dread washing over me. His posture was unsettling, his presence deliberate, and the way he lingered suggested he wasn't there by accident. I immediately called the non-emergency police line and explained what had happened. They sent an officer to review the footage, but without a clear view of the man's face or any identifiable details, there wasn't much they could do. The officers suggested I keep my doors and windows locked and report any further incidents. While their advice was practical, it didn't erase the growing fear that settled in my chest. That night, I double-checked every lock in the house and kept my phone close. My eyes darted constantly between the windows and the camera feed on my phone, but the man didn't come back, or at least, I didn't see him. Yet, every creak of the house, every gust of wind felt like an omen. The days that followed were uneventful, but tense. The absence of the mysterious figure did little to soothe my nerves, and I began second-guessing every sound and shadow. I told myself that perhaps the camera had scared him off. Maybe he'd moved on to someone else. But on the 4th night, just as I was beginning to feel a fragile sense of normalcy, the knocking returned. It was exactly 3 a.m. when the sound tore through the silence of the house. 3 deliberate knocks, followed by a pause and then 2 more. My blood ran cold as I froze in bed, barely breathing. This time, I didn't go to the door. Instead, I grabbed my phone and opened the live feed from the camera. There he was, the same hooded figure, standing at the edge of the porch, half hidden in shadow. He wasn't moving, just standing there, his head slightly tilted as if he could sense my fear through the walls. Suddenly, he took a step forward, raising his hand to knock again. His movements were slow, calculated and deliberate. My hands trembled as I hit the record button on the camera app, capturing every second of his unnerving presence. But just as I was about to call 911, something changed. The man's head snapped to the side, as if he'd heard something. He froze, standing rigid for a moment, and then, without warning, bolted into the darkness. The camera caught the faint outline of his retreating figure as he disappeared beyond the range of the porch light. I called the police again, but they found nothing. No footprints, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. The footage was all I had, and even that offered no answers. I never saw the man again, but the memory of those deliberate knocks and the image of his shadowed figure at my door still haunt me. What he wanted, and why he fled so suddenly, remains a mystery, one that I may never solve. The night my husband left for his business trip, everything seemed fine. I settled into the familiar quiet of the house and even enjoyed a solo movie night without a care. By the second evening, though, small things began to gnaw at the edges of my comfort. The first sign was the fridge door. When I walked into the kitchen that morning, it was slightly ajar. I chalked it up to being careless the night before, though I had no memory of leaving it open. Then the bathroom faucet started acting up. Even after twisting the handle tightly, I'd find it dripping when I checked. Later, I started to joke with myself about the house acting up without my husband there. But the real unease began at night. I'd hear faint creaks coming from the kitchen. At first, I convinced myself it was just the old wood floor shifting or the refrigerator settling. Yet the sounds grew louder and more deliberate, like someone walking slowly. On the third night, as I sat reading in the living room, I heard what sounded unmistakably like cabinets opening and closing. My heart sped up as I got up to check. I tiptoed toward the kitchen, holding my breath. When I turned the corner, everything was eerily still. The air felt heavy, suffocating even, but there was no one there. The cabinets were shut, and everything looked exactly as I had left it. I turned to leave, but my stomach sank. The shadows in the kitchen seemed darker, more oppressive, as if they were watching me. That night, I locked my bedroom door before going to sleep, something I had never done before. As I lay awake, my heart raced with every tiny creak of the house. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing, but the uneasy feeling didn't fade. I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't alone in the house. The next night, the unease boiled over into full-blown fear. I couldn't shake the paranoia. Every small sound sent my pulse racing. By midnight, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make tea, hoping it would calm my nerves. Big mistake. As I stood by the kitchen counter, waiting for the kettle to boil, the room felt different. The silence wasn't the usual quiet of an empty house. It was thick and unnerving, like someone was holding their breath just out of sight. I tried to shake it off, but then I heard it, a soft, scraping noise coming from the pantry. I froze, straining my ears. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. Maybe something shifted, or maybe a mouse. I told myself to stop being ridiculous and slowly approached the pantry. I opened the door to find nothing, just shelves of dry goods, completely undisturbed. Still, the hairs on my neck refused to settle. That's when I saw it. As I turned to leave, my eyes caught something in the glossy, black surface of the fridge door. It was faint, but unmistakable, the dark outline of a figure standing behind me. My breath caught in my throat. I spun around, but the kitchen was empty. My hands trembled as I backed away, staring at the space where the reflection had been. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bedroom with every light in the house on. By morning, I felt exhausted, but determined to figure out what was going on. I went to the store and bought a hidden camera, telling myself it was just to ease my mind. That evening, I set it up in the corner of the kitchen. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shadowy figure replaying in my mind. I didn't know what I'd capture, but I had to know the truth. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the hidden camera's SD card. My hands were clammy, my nerves shot. I had barely slept, every creak in the house keeping me on edge. Part of me didn't want to see what the camera captured, but my curiosity and fear won out. I plugged the card into my laptop and hit play. The footage started at 10 p.m. For hours, the kitchen was still. Every so often, I saw myself walk in and out, making tea or nervously checking the windows. Around 3:12 a.m., the screen flickered with movement. A man emerged from the pantry. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched him step into the kitchen like he owned the place. He wasn't in a rush. He moved slowly, almost casually, wearing dark clothes that blended into the shadows. He stood there, facing the stairs, and I realized with horror that he was watching, waiting for me to come down. For nearly 10 minutes, he didn't move, as if he was calculating something. Then, just as silently as he had appeared, he slipped back into the pantry and out of sight. My breath hitched. I paused the footage and rewound it, hoping I had imagined it, but there he was. I called the police immediately. When they arrived, they searched the pantry and the rest of the house. There was no sign of anyone, and the door to the outside showed no signs of forced entry. The officers reassured me it was probably someone who snuck in during the day, but had already moved on. Their words didn't comfort me. Even now, I don't know how he got in, or if he ever really left. Sometimes, when the house is quiet at night, I swear I hear faint creaks in the kitchen. I haven't been able to bring myself to check. The first time I noticed something strange, I thought it was just bad timing. I'd been living in the rental for about a month when I came home late one evening and saw someone standing in the driveway. A man, tall and thin, with a hood pulled over his head. He was facing away from me, staring at the empty street. I parked, expecting him to move, but he didn't. After a long moment, I rolled my window down, my voice wavering. "Can I help you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned slowly, just enough for me to see his face, a blank expression, his eyes dark and hollow. Then, without a word, he walked away into the shadows. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened, before hurrying inside and locking the door behind me. I told myself it was probably a random passerby, maybe someone lost or confused. But the next night, I saw him again, standing at the edge of the yard, just barely visible under the dim glow of the street lamp. This time, I stayed inside, peeking through the curtains as he lingered for what felt like hours before disappearing into the night. After that, strange things started happening. One morning, I found deep scratch marks on the front door, as though someone had been clawing at it. Another time, I heard faint tapping on the windows, late at night, but when I checked, no one was there. The tension was unbearable. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The landlord's assurance about the house being safe and quiet now felt like a cruel joke. Each night, I would double-check the locks, close all the curtains, and sit in the oppressive silence waiting for the next disturbance. A few nights after I first saw the man at the edge of the yard, I was woken up by a loud noise. It sounded like someone had knocked over the trash bins outside. My heart was racing as I sat up in bed, straining to hear what might come next. At first, there was nothing, just the familiar hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house settling. Then, faintly, I heard it. Footsteps. They weren't heavy or hurried, but deliberate, crunching slowly along the gravel outside. I forced myself out of bed, quietly tiptoeing to the window. Peeking through the curtains, I saw a figure walking along the side of the house. It was the same man I'd seen before. Hood pulled low over his face. My hands trembled as I watched him stop by the front door. He stood there, unmoving, staring at the house like he was deciding something. Then, to my horror, he reached out and tried the door handle. My chest tightened as I realized how vulnerable I was. I had locked the door before going to bed, hadn't I? Slowly, I grabbed my phone and dialed the police, barely breathing as I whispered my situation to the operator. The man rattled the doorknob one last time, then stepped back. He didn't leave, though. Instead, he moved to the window and pressed his face against the glass. The sight of him sent a jolt of fear through me. I ducked out of sight, clutching the phone as the operator reassured me that help was on the way. Minutes felt like hours as I stayed curled up in the corner of the room, heart hammering in my chest. I heard the sound of sirens in the distance, and when I looked again, the man was gone. The police searched the area but found nothing. They told me it was likely just someone passing through, maybe a drifter, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than that. The way he looked at the house, the way he lingered, it felt personal, like he had a reason for being there. After the incident with the man at my door, I was on edge constantly. I installed new locks and even bought a small security camera to monitor the outside. For a couple of days, everything was quiet, and I began to think maybe it was over. But then, things took a darker turn. One night, I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when a notification popped up from the security camera. It read, "Motion detected, front yard." My chest tightened as I clicked on the live feed. The screen loaded slowly, as if mocking my mounting anxiety. When the image finally appeared, it showed a figure standing just outside the reach of the porch light. They were positioned at the far edge of the yard, barely more than a shadow against the darker backdrop. I couldn't make out their face, but the posture was familiar, rigid and unnervingly calm. My heart raced as I watched the figure slowly step closer. One deliberate footfall after another until they disappeared out of the camera's view entirely. I didn't know what to do. I sat frozen on the couch, gripping my phone, listening for any sound. The house was eerily silent, the kind of silence that amplifies every creak and groan. Then I heard it, a soft tapping at the back window. I bolted to the kitchen, knife in hand, and yanked the curtain aside. Nothing. The yard was empty, shrouded in darkness, but the fear clawing at my chest told me I wasn't alone. I called the police again, barely able to get the words out. They arrived within minutes, but when they searched the property, they found no one. One officer stayed behind to review the footage from my camera. He froze as he watched the video, his face pale. When I asked what he saw, he hesitated before answering. I moved out the next day. To this day, I don't know who or what was watching me, but sometimes when I pass by that old house, I feel the weight of unseen eyes lingering, as if waiting for me to return.